I'm here to listen. Why am I walking on this way?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Muse's AT Podcast, where you can relive my epic journey with me. This is Muse, and what follows is my Appalachian Trail story. Today's episode covers Wednesday, June 18th, 2025, our first 0 day at Shaw's Hiker Hostel in the town of Monson, Maine. Quick reminder regarding the announcement that I made last episode. After this episode, we're going to enter a period of 4 weeks of replay episodes, something that I don't plan to do again, but I'm just going to be using these 4 weeks to apply learnings that I have had over these past 2 months of the podcast being live and retooling so that I can then be sustainable for the long haul. I am excited for the changes that are coming. It won't be changes that you guys necessarily will see, but I'm excited for changes in my production flow so that I can more efficiently deliver what I've been delivering. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoy a trip down memory lane, even if it's not too far in the past. And what I'll be doing is curating out of the 24 episodes we have, which 12 ought to span those 4 weeks. And today's haiku for this 0 day episode is from December 18th, 2023. The sleepy days come. This day is a forerunner. Rest to regain strength. All right, and as promised last episode, I want to hit you guys with a couple of trail glossary entries, catching up those definitions from past episodes. This first one is going to take you back to episode 20. I'd actually already mentioned them in an earlier episode, but mentioned once again the MATC. So let's talk a little bit about the MATC and kind of define the MATC. So the MATC is the Maine Appalachian Trail Club. It was founded on June 18th, 1935 by Myron Avery. And Myron Avery is one of the two gentlemen credited with founding the Appalachian Trail in the first place. And we ought to get at some point in time, probably some point not in the too distant future, into a little bit of the early trail history, probably a little bit of the trail history in general. And I know I do that in later journal entries, but I probably don't want to wait until then. We'll probably go ahead and precede that a little bit. So anyway, there's a guy, Myron Avery. He's really important, but one of the things he does is he founds the MATC, since that's what we're talking about here. And he does that in 1935, which is right about when the ground is really breaking on the Appalachian Trail, or at least the completion of it. It had been worked on for several years at that point, but we're almost complete. That'll be in 1937. At the time of the MATC's founding, there were 5 other Appalachian Trail Clubs in place. The very first, the granddaddy of them all, was the Appalachian Mountain Club, the AMC. They're founded way back in 1876. So the AMC predates even the idea of the Appalachian Trail by decades. And what they had been doing is maintaining existing trail networks all over New England, especially the White Mountains in New Hampshire. And some of those trails were later integrated into the AT in the 1930s. The next chronologically, you've got the Dartmouth Outing Club, the DOC, founded in 1909, and they are connected with Dartmouth College, which is right along the Appalachian Trail. Going from north to south like I did, I would actually end up in DOC lands right after passing from the AMC. So they basically take over for the rest of New Hampshire and connect that to the Green Mountains. Which brings us to the next chronologically, the Green Mountain Club, the GMC. They're founded in 1910 specifically to build the Long Trail. We've talked about the Long Trail recently a couple times. So the GMC would then take over once we get to the Long Trail along the AT. Next, 1927, the PATC, the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club. And I don't have this specifically in the research that I pulled up here, but I know that Myron Avery, again, was the president of the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club, the PATC, for many, many years, possibly even all the way till his death. I'll check into that one when we get to the area where the trail is under the care of the PATC. At the time of the AT's founding, Myron Avery was a lawyer in Virginia, even though he was originally from Maine, which is why he ends up having a lot of connection with those two trail clubs. And then the last one that was already in place at the time that the MATC was founded was the GATC. That was founded in 1930, so this is the Georgia Appalachian Trail Club, so the other end of the trail. This will be a fun thing to do as we get into these lands, and it'll take a little bit of research because it wasn't always obvious, or sometimes it switched very, very quickly. But there are 31 distinct trail maintaining clubs that partner with the ATC, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, the National Park Service, and the U.S. Forest Service to maintain the Appalachian Trail. And then the second term that I want to add to our trail glossary is the idea of a zero-drop shoe. Not necessarily limited to hiking, of course, but at the same time, this is going to be a major thing on trail. And this one came up in episode 18, which was the interview with Margot Polo, and she mentioned the professor who ended up with an injury because he had not transitioned into a zero-drop shoe. What a zero-drop shoe is that there is no height difference between your heel and your toe within this shoe. Most modern shoes have the heel elevated. And so while this is the most natural thing for the foot, because in modern times we've been conditioned to have that heel elevated, it takes a period of transition. In fact, a traditional running shoe is going to have a 12 millimeter drop from the heel to the toe. A zero-drop shoe, of course, has 0. Coming into the trail, I had been an ultra guy for years already. I run in ultras, and ultras I think of as the main zero-drop shoe company. I selected ultras for my trail runners that I brought on trail as well, although not the exact same model that I run in, obviously. Some other companies that are featuring zero-drop shoes are Topo Athletic, Innovate, which is INOV-8. You've also got Zero Shoes, XERO, and then Merrell has a barefoot line that is zero-drop, and then there's a company called Vivo Barefoot. And there are probably some more out there as well, but those are the main brands that come up when I look up zero-drop shoes. June 18th, 2025. Time to relax. Start, Shaw's Hiker Hostel, Monson, Maine. End, Shaw's Hiker Hostel, Monson, Maine. Miles, 0. All right, in the picture of this entry, just to kind of quickly remind you that I'm going to be describing the pictures. However, the entry describes the picture too, so maybe this one is a little bit silly. But what you've got is a picture of myself, Birdman, and Sunshine. As I look at it, I'm on the right of the picture, obviously the one taking the picture because I'm the most in the foreground. And then you've got Birdman in the middle with a pair of sunglasses and like a UFO like shirt or something like that. It's kind of cool. And then you've got Sunshine out on the left of the picture and probably the most into the background, sort of, in the way this is set up. You'd have to go into the picture to see exactly what I'm talking about there. But it's definitely at Shaw's. I do see the bathhouse kind of right behind Sunshine there. There's a tree that's more or less right behind Birdman that I remember being this big tree that's right in sort of the fire pit area. And that is situated right in front of Poets Gear Emporium, which I actually see in this picture kind of behind myself. And with that, I'll go into the reading of the entry. The pic above is at Shaw's with Birdman and Sunshine. Birdman stopped in quickly on his way out. He'll set up again in August. My whole job today was to lay around and let my legs recover. It was nice for a while, but then honestly, it got somewhat hard. It's just a change of pace for me. Dan and Michaela arrived today. They got out ahead of us back on the 13th as we suspected, but somewhere along the way just took it a little slower. Sounds like they missed us by about an hour at Birdman's. Now with some downtime and reliable service, I've added pictures to the entries from June 4th until today. Many of you will have already read those, but head back there to see pics. All right, we're going to take a quick break to hear from the sponsors who help keep Muse's AT podcast on the trail. These are offerings that truly enhanced my thru-hike experience, so I'd really like you to check them out. Please look for and follow the links in the show notes to this episode. Looking forward to that lazy day on the couch, knocking down your Netflix queue and wondering what to wear? Quick answer, wear something else. Summit Ready Apparel is clothing built for those who scramble over jagged rocks, reach the peaks, and actually enjoy getting caught in a torrential downpour. If you're someone who doesn't mind the elements and has the grit to crush the next segment anyway, look no further than Summit Ready to match your restless trail spirit. Check out the catalog at summitreadyapparel.com and get ready for your next adventure. That's summitreadyapparel.com. Looking for your next great trail read? Walk Uphill is a powerful story about leaving the emptiness of modern corporate life behind and finding a completely new beginning on the Appalachian Trail. It's about discovering what life can look like when you embrace freedom, lighten your load, and take it step by relentless step. I actually read this book myself during a couple rest days in Gorham, New Hampshire, right after conquering the brutal terrain of southern Maine. I literally couldn't put it down. I read it from cover to cover in 2 days. The book chronicles the real-life events of the author, Bounce the Hiker, in a twisty, shocking, edge-of-your-seat story that even the most imaginative fiction writer couldn't make up. Just a quick content warning, there is definitely adult material in this book, so I wouldn't recommend buying it for your 10-year-old's birthday. But if you're looking for a gripping, raw trail adventure, I highly recommend Walk Uphill by Bounce the Hiker. You can find it easily on Amazon by searching Walk Uphill Book, or just click the direct link in the show notes of this episode. All right, we got some more mail from Duncan, and I thought it was a good one to line up for a 0 day, and you'll see why. He's talking about 0 days in it a little bit. I also joked around with him a little bit that he did my homework for me, and he actually figured out where we would have crossed on trail, so that's kind of fun, and you'll hear that as we get into it. Now, this was sent on Monday, June 8th, so as this episode airs on Friday, June 26th, it's really not too far in the past, so we're kind of keeping pretty current here. Here we go. Hey, Muse. Today I listened to episode 16 where you wonder when we should have crossed paths. Turns out it would have been August 14th if I had not been taking a 0 at the Wicked Way Station hostel in West Wardsboro, Vermont. In trail mile terms, I was at Sobo mile 556.8 when you ended your day at mile 556.1, except I was probably lounging around the hostel eating ice cream to celebrate my day of rest. In the alternate reality where I didn't 0, I estimate we would have met around Sobo mile 548 near Winhall River. It would have been awesome to meet, but I kind of needed a 0 day. It had been 264 miles in 19 days since my last 0. I had stayed at the Vanessa Brown Hostel in Salisbury, Connecticut, and the Travel Lodge in Great Barrington, Massachusetts during that time, so while I don't want to overstate the hardship, I did hike on those 2 days. One funny story. I had ordered my 4th and last pair of trail shoes for delivery to the Wicked Way Station, except I had neglected to include the Wicked Way Station in the delivery instructions by just using the hostel's address of 356 Stratton Arlington Road, West Wardsboro, Vermont. It turns out there's a 356 Stratton Arlington Road, Stratton, Vermont, about 1 mile away, and sometimes packages are delivered there. Sometimes, meaning often enough that the hostel routinely stops by the other address just to make sure to take a look for possible misdelivered packages. I guess the lesson learned is to be as specific as possible on the delivery address. I mean, that's true off trail too, but you don't want to be chasing down wayward packages during your hike. Happy trails, Duncan. And so another fun note from Duncan, and like I said, yeah, he did my homework for me. We would have met near Winhall River in Vermont. I think it's cool that he brings in the mail here because that's kind of a big thing on trail is getting your packages, getting stuff sent to you, catching up with your packages when a post office is open, stuff like that. And even also mailing stuff. I did a lot of mailing stuff back home, as I know you've already heard. But there's a whole logistical reality to the post office that you almost kind of take for granted when you're just at home and you just run to the post office every so often. That now on a through hike is almost a lifeline. Like Duncan mentioned here, he's getting shoes. As you can imagine, to a hiker, shoes are no small thing. And picking a future stop and sending that information home to have somebody send that to a hostel for you and everything, that is a very common thing to do as well. It's actually, I suppose, one of the amenities of Shaw's here that I didn't even mention, is that the whole package is for you. That's true of a lot of the hostels. First time I really took advantage of this would have been the Notch Hostel in Lincoln, New Hampshire, as I needed my first shoes. Maine had torn up my shoes, but I had heard that the whites will tear up your shoes too, so I purposefully chose that one because then I could get most of the way through the whites, getting as much mileage out of that first pair of shoes as I possibly could. And to be perfectly honest, I probably got a little more mileage than I really should have, but it worked out. It worked out just fine. And I got my new shoes just to exit the whites, essentially. And I did something similar to what Duncan's talking about here. I just sent, it actually ended up being my son this time, right? So I said, hey, Evan, send it to this address. And from there, you just kind of hope the package is there when you get there. And of course, it worked out 100% of the time for me. But I can see how easily something like what Duncan's describing here could have happened as well. Post office mixes it up, and I guess in this case, they mix it up so often that the hostel's checking on it anyway. But you get there and that pair of shoes isn't there. I can imagine there's a little bit of anxiety kind of attached to that as well. Funny in retrospect, though. Going into commentary with this entry, first, what is the day like? Because the entry's a little bit sparse on that, although there wasn't really a whole lot going on, which was kind of by design, right? First thing is I made myself lay in bed until it was absolutely excruciating not to be moving around. But I knew I had some sore legs. I mean, they really were. They were kind of sore. So I just said, I have got to, and no matter how bored I get, no matter what is going on, I've got to just lay here. And I'm going to guess that's probably when I met Margot Polo, because that was the only time in Monson I was really like, I was dedicated to that being my task. It was my job to be in that bed. And I think we talked for a little bit, but I mean, I got to imagine that eventually gets boring to her just talking to this dude that's laying in a bed, right? So that's probably what's behind the fact that we didn't really talk that much in Monson. This is probably her 0 day this Wednesday, because it also sounds like she left Monson when the storm hit that night, which would have been the next day, Thursday. Okay, so I'm making myself lay in bed, but what am I doing, right? So this could kind of go back into what kind of media am I consuming? So I probably read a little bit. I'm sure I did. I know what I did was I not only caught up on probably a bit of writing, but I also went and attached pictures to all those past journal entries, because I even mentioned that in the entry there. Some of the other things are going to be features of my town stops, especially here in New England. First one I'll mention is that I actually was still getting a hang of Instagram. I know, it's kind of funny, but I was still getting a hang of that, and I still really didn't get the hang of it at all. Ratatouille ended up teaching me it later, but enough that I could catch up on what Kara and Luke were up to. So that would be actually some of my entertainment when I got into town, is I would just catch up on their reels and see what's going on out on the West Coast. Another one was that I was watching YouTube videos. I was watching, at this point in time, I hadn't even met Utag yet, so I wasn't yet watching Utag's YouTube channel. In fact, frankly, I don't even think Utag was on trail yet. But I had a couple of channels that I was following. One of the main ones would have been the Greenbelly channel. So I talked about, Chris Cage and the stuff he was putting out there, and continues to. I was just watching some of that stuff a couple days ago as well. The other one that was pretty cool, that was enhancing of the experience for me, was a course that I took on Real Life Catholic. It was called The Way of the Apostle, and it followed St. Paul and his various destinations in his travels. So I got in a rhythm of doing one of those lessons in every town that I got to. So it was kind of cool because St. Paul's in a different town, I'm in a different town, and I go ahead and hear what Chris Stefanik, the founder of Real Life Catholic, has to say about St. Paul specifically in that location. It was a really well-done course, and it was something that, like I said, it added to my journey. Another thing that I have teed up for this episode is to talk a little bit broader about the town of Monson. So I mentioned sort of the layout and basic facilities of Shaw's Hiker Hostel in last episode. But what does the town look like? The town of Monson, at least as I experienced it, was really along these two main streets. There was Pleasant Street, which is a street that Shaw's was on, and then there was another street, which is just Main Street. And pretty much every time that I would have left the hostel to go do anything, go eat, whatever, it would have been leaving the hostel along Pleasant Street, going straight to Main Street, and then doing something on Main Street. Right there at the corner of Pleasant and Main, there's two things that are notable. One is the general store, and the general store had like everything, including like you could get sandwiches made there, ready-made salads. I know you heard me talk about the blueberry broccoli salad that I had a couple times from the general store when I was talking to Margot Polo. And there were a few times that this became sort of a group trek over to the general store, which was kind of cool. I remember walking there a couple of different times with Haley and Hoot and Sunshine. The other thing right there is across Pleasant, basically on the same side of the street as the hostel, and I have to imagine that they get plenty of hiker business, is the ice cream shop. Oddly enough, neither Haley nor I had any ice cream in Monson. Don't really know why, that just didn't happen. So if you went down Pleasant and took a right, you would cross Pleasant and then go in front of the general store, you'd come upon a number of things. There were a couple restaurants there, and I think we probably ate at a couple of them. I remember at one point, I'm going to say it was Friday night, eating outside with Haley and Sunshine. That was really awesome. Really enjoyed that particular meal, to be honest. Not even the faintest idea what I actually ate. That really had nothing to do with it. It was just it was a nice, that was kind of where I got to know Sunshine a whole lot better. And then as you continue down, not too much further, on the other side of Main Street is the Monson Appalachian Trail Visitor Center, which is operated by the ATC. And I'm thinking this was a Wednesday activity when Haley and I would have gone down to the visitor center and gotten our hang tags, our official 2025 Thru Hiker hang tags, which is, of course, still affixed to my backpack right now. Actually, when I had to replace my backpack late in the hike, I did take the hang tag and put it on the new backpack, and the hang tag held up perfectly and identified me as a thru hiker throughout my thru hike. We also had a really good time at the visitor center there, talking to Navigator, getting a lot of information on what was coming on up trail. Actually, and this was kind of maybe a little further forward than maybe it even needed to be. I don't know. There was in particular a lot of information about navigating the whites, how to make it through the whites, what that whole system was with the campsites and how to get your card for the campsites, and also a good way to think about getting through there and where you would want to stay every night, that sort of thing, which was good. It was always good to plan ahead. The other thing on Main Street, and this was a little further down the road. This had to be 1.5 miles, maybe even 2 miles down the road. Not absolutely sure, but it was a little bit of a walk. But it was this gas station, and this is where you heard in the talk with Wayfinder where we got the calzones. And that was definitely a Tuesday thing. That was the first thing we hit when we got into town on Tuesday, but it was another time too. Maybe it was Wednesday again, maybe it was Thursday, I don't know. But we definitely got those calzones twice while we were in Monson, and so the gas station was a bit of a destination as well. The other thing I wanted to talk about today is just simply who's there with us at Shaw's Hiker Hostel. And this, for the most part, is going to be a lot of reunion and not introduction, so I won't necessarily introduce. I may just kind of list the names. So we've got, as you know, Mario Polo, Cameron, who will be later renamed Party Girl, Caveman, Dunk, and Chaps were all there. Sunshine was, of course, there. Jackson, I want to say, was in and out very quickly. He was maybe only just there one night. He may not have even zeroed. Taco may have zeroed, but he may have zeroed on the day that we arrived. I'm not absolutely sure. I feel like he was in and out fairly quickly as well. Daddy Longlegs was there. Daddy Longlegs would ultimately leave with Caveman, Dunk, and Chaps. And I think that they left on that Thursday. I was aware of them leaving for some reason, but they didn't actually leave with us. And Haley and I left on that Friday to continue south. Won't Get Up Will was there. She may have left the same day as those guys as well. Not absolutely sure. I guess it would have probably had to be. I don't know, because there really aren't that many days to play with here. And then, of course, you've got the people who work there. I mean, Hippie Chick and Poet, who own the place. And then there's Cooper, and we'll meet Chester later on because he's going to drive the shuttle to Bangor. A couple other folks who work there. There are any number of other people that are staying there that were, I mean, it was, like I said, it was a real fun, just kind of laid back atmosphere, just hanging out. 2 northbounders that really kind of stick out are Hoot and Rocket. Hoot and Rocket, they did leave the same time as we did on Friday. And that was one of the things that the trailhead was kind of saying our goodbyes to Hoot and Rocket. That was pretty cool. But they were just a lot of fun to hang out with. And we hung out with them a good amount. Later on in the Friday-Saturday time frame, I remember Frogger, Spicy, and Ribbit coming in. And also Kiddo and Hero. Although Kiddo and Hero were actually maybe like Friday, maybe even Thursday. I'm not sure. I feel like their overlap with us was a little bit longer than Frogger and Spicy and Ribbit. But all of those are folks that I'll call in my sort of second Monson crowd. I'll probably introduce them as we're leaving Monson because they'll all be really present as we come through Caratunk and even onward. Before I leave the introductions, one fun thing about Hoot specifically is he talked about this friend of his that got Lyme disease, actually. And Lyme disease is a real concern out there on the trail. That's a topic we should pick up at some point. So his friend got Lyme disease, and he ended up stopping in Gorham, New Hampshire. Gorham, New Hampshire seems to come up quite a bit. He stopped there and stayed there for maybe like a month or something like that, just recovering from Lyme disease, at least a few weeks. And one of the fun things, we'll get this later, one of the things I'm not coming up with right now is the name of this friend, but we might get that later because I am going to end up running into him my very last day in Maine. So that's kind of a fun thing for later. And with that, I think I will leave it there for this nice, restful day in the beautiful town of Monson, Maine. I feel like I haven't said this for a while, so I better throw it out there. Please get in touch with me as anything comes up, whether it's a question, comment, just a thought. You can get me by email at museatpodcast@gmail.com, on Instagram at musehikes, or if you're clicking through to my trail journal, you could actually leave something in the guest book, and I will pick up your message that way as well. Next new episode a few weeks out will be continuing, of course, our time in Monson, and a quick reminder that next Monday we'll be starting that replay, and I am going to start that replay with episode 1. Until then, this has been Muse, and you have been listening to Muse's AT Podcast. Thank you for walking with me, and happy trails.